brilliant conversation, guys. Thank you. And like Ben said, we are now going to talk all things space. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome onto the stage Sanjeev Gordhan, General Partner for TypeOne Ventures, and Katie King, CEO and co-founder of BioOrbit. Where do you want to go, left or right? Hi. How's it going? All right, so before we kick off, I'm personally interested in this. I'd love to hear just a bit about what you do, your background, and why you're so well-versed to have this conversation right now.
I'll let you go first.
Sure. So, hi, my name is Katie. I'm CEO and founder of BioOrbit, and we're building a pharmaceuticals factory in microgravity to change the way in which cancer treatments are given to patients. So, background as a scientist, love space, and the industry is changing so rapidly at the moment that it's very exciting as to what can be done in space.
Yeah.
And so that's where BioOrbit
Yeah, there's just so much potential, isn't there? Okay.
Start thinking about kind of manufacturing of pharmaceuticals in space coming back to Earth. Like it's crazy. But, yeah, be ready to be mind blown. That's what we'll say. So my background, not technical at all, which is very telling of where the industry is going. I had my own business, sold that on, got into financial services. Placed my first investment into space in 2016, and just haven't got out the black hole, and I can't. Just keep going down into this big, deep black hole. But it's such a fascinating area. So after having done that from a wealth management side, I got into fund management, where we looked at space investments. And now we've got TypeOne Ventures, which focuses predominantly on space, but also looks at other space-adjacent technologies and life sciences, especially where they all kind of combine. And we will be using space as an enabling technology overall.
Wow. I think for a lot of people, when they think space, they just think far-fetched sci-fi movies, not something that's really happening. But stuff is really happening, really
absolutely.
Influential, and things that are going to really make an impact in our lives is happening right now, and space is at the forefront of that. So my first question is, what would you say are the most exciting technological advancements on the horizon that are going to shape the future of space, travel, and tourism? You don't have to answer all three, but, you know, what are your thoughts on that?
Do you know what? I'm just going to spin it for 1 second.
Yeah,
We do a poll. Hands up, if given the chance next week, who here would go to space for a week? Brilliant. Who here would carry on going to space if it was a couple of months? And who's going if it's a one-way mission? Interesting. I'll come and speak to you later on.
Got the brave man over there.
Yeah, exactly. Next target. But the reason I asked that question and did the poll based on what you just asked there is, like you said, there is so much going on. And space travel and tourism has been reported as being such a huge industry because that's where people are thinking of what's going on. It's space travel and tourism that is going to be funding a lot, and that is funding a lot of research and development that is allowing for us to look at these types of businesses. So when you think about the billionaire space race with Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, etc., all building the biggest rockets that they can to get to space, it's not just a billionaire space race. That's actually funding so much more innovation that is going to impact us on Earth. But we need that level of money from those millionaires and billionaires to be able to see how we can develop different types of innovation and different types of things that we aren't even aware of at the moment. So,
and I think that's what's grabbing the headlines, though, isn't it? Because, you know, I'm just speaking from personal experience. We talk about space. It's like, who's going to go up to space? All these millionaires and their sons are going up there and having a great time. But like you said, it's really, it's providing the funding. More. It's really helping innovate other areas. But I don't think that's something that is really at the forefront of what we know as the general public right now. So I think a bit more education needs to happen on that side.
100%. And that's actually what you do a bit of outside as well, isn't it? So.
Yeah, I think speaking about the space industry is so important because the media only really covers this space tourism side, and it gives such a, I think, like bad rep, or a very sort of, it makes it seem like, oh, that's all it's about. Whereas it's missing so much, and there's so much work and potential for the use of space for our day-to-day lives that's just untapped. And I just think like speaking more about that and how space can benefit our lives would help to inspire the next generation in, rather than just, oh, I went and I touched space and came back down.
Yeah, and I think that ostracizes a lot of people as well, because, you know, with that kind of travel comes a big bank account, you know? When everyone can get involved. You don't need to be super technologically minded. You don't have to have a big bank account to really benefit from the benefits of space, basically.
There's an interesting charity that is it's called Space for Humanity, and they are taking individuals from communities all over the world who aren't they aren't necessarily astronauts or trained astronauts, etc.
Yeah.
They're taking individuals who can have an impact on their community, who are leading community, and taking them into space without them having to pay for it. And the reason that they're doing that is because there's a thing called the overview effect. And if anyone here hasn't heard of it, please go and research this. It's the overview effect is what happens to us psychologically when we are taken off our planet and we look back down at how tiny our blue marble is. And we see how fragile it is, and we see the fact that there's not really any borders there. So once you've done that and you come back and you realize, well, hold on, this is actually what we've got our space as. We need to be doing more with this. We need to be looking at how we can save our planet. Because at the moment, although there is going to be some stuff that we can talk about of new civilizations and whatever on other planets, for the foreseeable future, for our lifetimes, this is our planet.
Yeah.
However, we've got so many resources and opportunities within our kind of solar system that we can tap into.
Yeah, and on that note, Katie, I know you think space tourism is quite far away. I personally agree as well. You know, I think the CAA is saying in the next 10 years we'll be able to make that suborbital journey from like London to Sydney in 2 hours. Not sure I'm convinced. The idea is great because I hate travelling for long distances. But so what are the more kind of human-related areas that are around the corner that are going to really benefit from this space industry?
Yeah, sure. So when it comes to health and life sciences, it's incredible what opportunities are there in space. So aging, as an example, happens faster in a space environment. So there's a lot of research to see, okay, if disease progresses faster, then if we can find a drug that slows it down in a space environment, does that mean that we can help slow it down on Earth? Because you've got an acceleration process that you can play with. So that's quite exciting because that research going on can then filter down.
Yeah.
And then what we're working on is actually manufacturing certain drugs in space that you cannot make on Earth because gravity screws it up. So it's like, okay, we can make brand new drugs that are more effective and then use them on Earth. So there's a lot of research happening, and I think because SpaceX has completely changed the game and it's made space so much more accessible, we're going to start seeing a lot more discoveries and use cases.
Yeah.
And just to put that into context, like what's happened with SpaceX, Elon Musk, love him, hate him, whatever the views are, we won't go into that right now, but what's happened with SpaceX is they've enabled the launches happening at a much higher cadence and being done by reusable rockets. So you've gone from having launch costs at being tens of millions per kg to now 1,500 per kg. Once you do that, you then see different business models becoming a lot more viable, which we couldn't do before. And in addition to that, we're seeing launches go from a couple a year to now we've already got 64 launches just with SpaceX so far this year, and we're only halfway through. So you've got the opportunity of companies like Katie with BioOrbit to be able to put satellites into space, not having to worry about the spend of those different kind of components, etc., and get things into space, start testing, and get product back to Earth in a much more commercial way than what has ever been previously.
Yeah.
That's from a financial perspective. Then if you tap into the environmental, where again it's seen as such a negative because you see a launch and you see all of that fuel, etc. We've done a study to figure out that actually for one of our other companies called SpaceForge, for every 1 kg of CO2 carbon emissions that they emit to make the satellite and launch, they're saving our planet 80. Because the material that we are making in space with them is going to reduce the energy requirements in data centers, in telecoms, in infrastructure. So you put that into the context. Yes, there is launch and fuel of that, but you look at the rest of the things that's been saved by making something in its natural environment in space. It's huge.
Yeah, God, you guys are blowing my mind right now. Honestly.
I did say that at the start. Yeah.
So let's kind of not move away from the space and travel tourism side of things and bring in some other areas as well. I know you're quite keen to talk about manufacturing. You know, what is the impact that will have for Earth and, you know, much sooner, I guess, than people realise?
Absolutely.
Me included.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and I'll let Katie kind of delve into the details on her side, but the other areas that we're looking at, so with SpaceForge, they are manufacturing material that will go into semiconductor chips. Now, they've had a contract with BT. BT have basically said, even if you save our energy cost by 2-3%, you're talking hundreds of millions of pounds. And they can, with one launch of their platform, can bring back enough material to service the entire UK's 5G network. That's happening within the next 2 years at least, in terms of the amount of material that's going to be coming down. That's impacting our lives because we're seeing how those different parts are going to be coming into not necessarily our phones, but the things that are driving things like our phones and AI, etc.
Yeah.
So that's happening a lot sooner than people think. Then you go onto the pharmaceutical side.
Yep.
If you can touch on the research and then go into what you guys are doing, that's, I think, again, people won't realize how much research is happening there.
Yeah, it's true. So, so the whole benefit of microgravity versus on Earth is to do with a process called crystallization. And this has been studied on the ISS for decades, really. So it's like the science has known that you can form these better crystal structures in space versus on Earth. And then what that means for drugs, so we're looking at antibodies and cancer treatment with antibodies. So currently, I mean, half of us in this room are statistically expected to develop cancer, which is very scary. And currently that means we'd have to go to hospital and get it in our veins. But through forming a crystal version of it, you can now make a subcutaneous, i.e. just under the skin injection. And that means you can now stay at home, quality of life increases, and you don't need to go to hospital anymore. That burden on the hospitals is not there as much. And like we are sending something to space next year to do our first tests, to do our crystallization process, which is really exciting. In terms of manufacturing, I think that will be another year, maybe 2 after that, to like make sure it's all optimized, etc. So again, it's not. It sounds sci-fi initially, thinking
really
factory
does.
in space, but it's really close.
It's real and it's happening and it's the now. And in terms of, going back to cost and money, I imagine it is quite a costly process, but is it as costly as I'm thinking? Is it? Nah.
It's actually not, because the infrastructure has changed so much. But like for what you might think, okay, space and access to space would cost tens or hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
But because this infrastructure is now there, getting access to the space station, these satellites that can return, those costs are coming down. So it's not, it's not tens of millions, it's on the couple.
Yeah.
In this case, like we've invested in the pre-seed round for KT's business, and we're now able to, because of the cadence and the cost, we're able to pre-seed a company with hundreds of thousands, maybe 1 million or 2, have flight test in space and product back on Earth for that time and that amount. That was unthinkable just literally 3-4 years ago. But that's how much the costs have come down and the ability with timing to get something into space. So yeah, it's nowhere near the hundreds of millions that people think it is.
Yeah, but I think again, that's the media, I'm in the media, but it's just, they really do paint this kind of future where everything's so expensive and it's kind of a rich boys club and you can't get involved and this incredible stuff is happening. I mean, what you just said about semiconductors and the materials, that's a huge talking point at the moment, and going to different countries, saying they're pilfering all this materials from other countries, and it's a really negative talking point at the moment. So I don't understand why that's not being front and center with the headlines compared to the negative.
Well, as we all know, it doesn't sell as well as looking at it in a negative way. But in terms of like, if you do go out and look at research some of the stuff that's going on in the industry, you will see, funny enough, there is still a lot of collaboration when it comes to space. So with the UK, yes, Brexit, whatever, think again on either side of that. But when it comes to space, we're still a part of the Horizon programme with the European countries on that side. There's still a lot of collaboration going on with US and India for a private astronaut space mission that's happening on that side. UK again with the UAE. There's a lot of collaboration that's not talked about, again, because
of course.
It's just not necessarily the thing that's going to get the clickbait. But look into the research as to what's happening. Look at what's the types of mission that these different countries are doing and the collaborations you've got going on. That's definitely what's going to drive it, because this industry needs that level of collaboration between companies like KT, Spaceforge, and ourselves to be able to get to that kind of space as a technology and enabler for our daily civilization.
Yes, it's interesting you say collaboration, because going back to the kind of space race, it's you've got all these different countries trying to be the first to go to Mars, and they all keep their card to their chest, and it's very much a race, and people don't seem to want to collaborate as much, but you're seeing a lot more collaboration when it comes to other fields.
On that side, yeah. No, we're never going to get to, so the ISS, the International Space Station, it's going to be decommissioned by 2030, if not a little bit sooner. The ISS was a collaboration across 10 plus different countries. And we've had that up there for, nearly 30 years now, right?
Yep.
unfortunately, we're not going to get to that level of collaboration again, where we have so much of the different countries partaking in such a station. However, we're now going to see more collaboration between corporates and governments, where we will see private space stations going into space again, over the next few years, where it will be a couple of countries and a private collaborating to do it.
Well, I mean, collaboration is key, not just in the space world, but in all realms of all aspects of life. You know, that's how we progress and move forward. And if we don't work together, then that becomes kind of stagnant, and we don't move forward quicker, and the progression just doesn't happen. Yeah. So would you say, or are there any other industries or areas that you think will benefit hugely from space other than what we've talked about?
I'm trying to think.
Well, there's mining has been talked about from space a lot. Now, yes, asteroid mining, you read some of those bits there that we bring one of those asteroids back and that's it. Everyone in this world is a billionaire because of the amount of gold that's available. That's not necessarily something that I'm going to be going into, but when you take that you take the idea of that and actually you apply that to the lunar surface and lunar economy, we're going to be seeing, again, in our lifetimes, the lunar economy being a base for further exploration. We're going to be able to get the type of resources that we need from the moon's surface itself. So we're not having to launch that type of material from Earth. We're getting it from the lunar economy, and we're using that fuel source as a way of getting satellites to live longer, service longer, and also getting over to moon and exploring our universe a bit more. So that's definitely something that I think is happening outside of what we're talking about.
I think as well, I mean, I think infrastructure is really exciting, which might not sound like, oh, great, infrastructure, but anything, if you think about infrastructure on Earth, you know, to get to any place, you have train stations, we have petrol stations, those things are being replicated in space. So the petrol station for your satellite where it can refuel, and effectively the moon is your train stop before getting to Mars. I mean, that's kind of how I picture it.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, it's like, okay, so we're getting courier services that can take you to space and bring you back down, but like anything that you think of on Earth is having to change and be developed for space, because it's just an environment, really. And it's like, I think if we just start seeing space as a different environment rather than this like crazy out of reach place, it makes things seem a little bit more
achievable, more attainable. For sure.
The space part and the infrastructure part of it is really funny, because we had a conversation with some of the hoteliers, and MGM want to have a hotel in space. They want to be the first to have a hotel in space. And yeah, exactly, we laugh about it. But it's a big thing, actually, because yes, you'll get the millionaires and stuff wanting to go there. But actually what's going to drive that is more space and infrastructure for things like Katie's program. And on the way here, we were driving down and talking about having to rent space in space, no pun intended, but rent space in space to be able to build and actually make the pharmaceuticals that we have here. We're going to be looking at infrastructure, real estate in space, the same way we look at space here. Like, okay, we need to get a biolab. Okay, this is the cost per square meter, etc.
It's just what we do, isn't it? Because there's an area, it's like, how can we take it over? It's like the digital realm and the metaverse, people buying properties in there. It still blows my mind, because I can't believe people are spending hundreds and millions of pounds on digital infrastructure, but it is what it is. So the Civil Aviation Authority, they suggest that in the next 10 years, we'll be able to make that journey from London to Sydney, like I mentioned. But I want to ask you guys, Katie, I feel like I know your answer already, but how realistic do you think this is?
I mean, there's a lot of regulation that needs to change and come in, and that's fine. Like, regulation has to change. It has to be dynamic as the world is changing. I'm not sure about 10 years.
Yeah, I don't think 10 years.
I just don't know if there's that much of a. I mean, you might be able to say.
I was going to say, we've got a portfolio company that's hopefully doing it sooner.
So you can say. And I don't know about how much of a driver there is for that sort of service. I mean, I'm very focused on the pharmaceutical world. But I mean, what would you say, Sanj?
So if you look at, the panelists before us were talking about, you've got to look at the past to see what's happening going forward. When we first had aeroplanes coming through, look at what the costs of that were and compare that to where we're seeing the journey now with space. And by space, I don't necessarily mean going into space, but the flights from, let's say, UK to New York, etc., within a matter of hours. We will see a drastic drop in prices once we get to the point where that technology proves itself out. In the same way we saw what happened with the aviation industry. So yes, we're not kind of 3-4 years there. It's going to be a bit longer. It's probably going to be closer to the 10. But we will see that inflection of price points drop massively once we've had those things tested out. And at the same time, it's not the physics behind it makes sense. It's now just the engineering that we need to accomplish, which is, when we talk about the engineering of it, it's tweaking how it's done. It's not messing with the physics of it. So that's where I think we're a little bit closer, and I hope that's the case, because one of our companies does exactly that.
Yeah, I hope
they're
that's
building
the case.
a space
I've
plane.
invested, so I hope that's the case too. And on that note, guys, I think we could talk about this for ages, but thank you so much for sharing your insight. Honestly, you've blown my mind. I'm going to be reading up so much about this after this day.
Yes.
Thank you. Give it up to Sanjeev and Katie. And they're all knowledgeable expertise.